The Arctic is not a place for humans. At least, it shouldn't be. We are tropical animals, fundamentally. Our ancestors evolved on the warm savannas of Africa. We have no natural fur, no thick layers of blubber. We are creatures of the sun. So, when you stand on the sea ice with the wind cutting through you and the temperature dropping to a point where exposed skin freezes in minutes, the question is not just a curiosity. It's a profound puzzle. How did a naked ape from Africa end up living and thriving in a world of ice? The answer isn't simple. It's not one thing. It's a story of change, both inside and out. It's a story of evolution, but not just the slow grinding evolution of genes over millennia. It's also a story of a second, faster kind of evolution, the evolution of culture, of ideas, of technology. These two threads, the biological and the cultural, twisted together to create one of the most remarkable survival stories on Earth. Let's start with the journey. Humans didn't just appear in the Arctic, they walked there. It was a long walk, spanning tens of thousands of years. As groups of Homo sapiens moved out of Africa, they spread across Asia. They slowly adapted to cooler climates, but Siberia was another level of cold. This was the Great Filter. The people who pushed into these northern lands thousands of years ago were already tough. They were already skilled hunters. They had to be. But the Arctic proper, the land of permanent ice and polar nights, demanded more. The first people to truly crack the Arctic code lived in a world that no longer exists. During the last ice age, sea levels were much lower. A vast land bridge called Beringia connected Siberia and Alaska. It wasn't a narrow strip of ice. It was a huge, cold, dry grassland, a steppe environment stretching for 1,000 miles. This was the world of the mammoth hunters. These were the ancestors of all Native Americans and also the deep ancestors of later Arctic peoples like the Inuit. Living in Beringia for thousands of years was a training ground. It was an evolutionary crucible. Here, nature began to select for traits that helped people survive the relentless cold. This is where the biological story really begins. Our bodies are furnaces. We burn food to create heat. In a warm climate, getting rid of excess heat is a problem, but in the Arctic, the problem is keeping it. Every calorie is precious. The body has to become incredibly efficient at generating and conserving warmth. One of the most obvious adaptations is body shape. You might have heard of Bergmann's rule and Allen's rule in biology class. They're simple ideas. Bergmann's rule says that for a species, populations in colder climates tend to have larger, bulkier bodies. Allen's rule says they tend to have shorter limbs. Think of a polar bear versus a sun bear. The polar bear is massive and blocky. The sun bear from the tropics is smaller and lankier. This is about surface area to volume. Heat is lost through the surface of your skin. The more surface area you have compared to your total volume, the faster you lose heat. A stocky, compact body with shorter arms and legs has less surface area for its size. It's a better shape for staying warm. It's like a sphere versus a long, thin wire. The sphere holds heat best. Over generations, the selective pressure of the cold favored this body plan in Arctic population. People with this build were slightly more likely to survive, to have children, and to pass on their genes. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was just physics playing out over deep time. But body shape is just the container. What about the engine inside? The metabolism of Arctic peoples is where some of the most fascinating adaptations are found. Their traditional diet was unlike almost any other on Earth. For much of the year, there were no plants to eat. No fruits, no vegetables, no grains. The diet was almost entirely meat and fat. Seals, whales, caribou, fish. This kind of high-fat, high-protein diet would cause problems for most people. But Arctic populations evolved to handle it. Scientists have found specific genetic changes in modern Inuit populations that show this. One of the most significant is a variation in a gene called CPT1A. You can think of this gene as a switch that helps control how the body burns fat for energy. The variant common in the Inuit seems to make their bodies much better at using fat as a primary fuel source. It also helps generate more heat from that fat. This genetic tweak gave them a huge advantage. They could eat a diet that was almost pure fat and not only survive but thrive. It kept their internal furnace burning hot. There's another problem with an all-meat diet: vitamin deficiency. We're always told to eat our vegetables to get vitamins. How did they get vitamin C to prevent scurvy? Or vitamin D when the sun disappears for months? Again, the answer is in their food and how they ate it. Raw meat contains small amounts of vitamin C. The organs of animals, especially things like seal liver or muktuk whale skin and blubber, are surprisingly rich in it. By eating their food fresh and often raw or lightly cooked, they preserve these vital nutrients. For vitamin D, the sunshine vitamin, they got it from the same source many of us do fatty fish. Seal, whale, and Arctic char are loaded with it. Their diet was their medicine, perfectly adapted to their environment. The cold also attacks your body directly, especially your hands and feet. Frostbite is a constant danger. Most people, when their hands get cold, the blood vessels in their skin clamp down. It's a defense mechanism called vasoconstriction. The body sacrifices the extremities to keep the warm blood in the core, protecting the vital organs. It's a smart trade-off, but it leads to frozen fingers. Arctic peoples evolved a more sophisticated response. Their blood vessels still constrict, but then they periodically open up again, sending waves of warm blood to the hands and feet before clamping down again. This cycle, sometimes called the hunting response, is a way of walking a tightrope. It keeps the core warm while also protecting the hands and feet from freezing. It's a beautifully tuned physiological adaptation honed by thousands of winters. These biological changes are incredible. They show evolution at work, shaping the human body for one of the harshest places on Earth. But if you left a person with all these genetic gifts naked on the ice, they would still die in hours. Biology was only half the equation. The other half, the part that moved faster and had an even bigger impact, was culture. Humans are not physically impressive animals. We can't outrun a caribou. We don't have the teeth or claws of a polar bear. Our great evolutionary advantage is our brain, and that brain allows us to create culture tools, knowledge, and social systems. This is our primary survival kit. In the Arctic, that kit had to be a work of genius. Let's start with clothing. You can't survive the Arctic without it, and not just any clothing. It has to be the best cold weather gear ever invented. The traditional Inuit clothing system was, and is, a masterpiece of engineering. The key was caribou skin. Caribou hair is hollow. Each hair is a tiny air-filled tube. Hair is a fantastic insulator. A parka made from caribou skin is like wearing a coat made of millions of tiny thermos bottles. It's incredibly warm and surprisingly lightweight. But it wasn't just the material. It was the design. They used a layering system. An inner layer of clothing would be worn with the fur facing inward against the skin. The soft fur would trap a layer of warm air. An outer layer, like a parka, would be worn with the fur facing out. This outer layer shed snow and blocked the wind. The parka had a large hood, often lined with a ruff of wolverine fur. Wolverine was the perfect choice because it doesn't hold moisture. Your warm, wet breath won't freeze into a chunk of ice around your face. Every detail was perfected over centuries of trial and error. Boots, called kamiks, were made of sealskin, which is waterproof. They were sewn with sinew thread that swelled when wet, sealing the stitch holes. This wasn't just clothing, it was personal life support equipment. Next comes shelter. The most iconic Arctic home is the igloo. People in the South often think of it as a simple dome of ice. It's not. It's made of hard-packed snow, which is a much better insulator than solid ice. The igloo is an architectural marvel based on a deep understanding of physics. The blocks are cut from the snowpack and spiral upwards in a tightening circle, creating a self-supporting dome. You don't need any internal frame. The entrance was a short tunnel, with a cold trap, a lower section where the dense cold air would settle, preventing it from flowing into the main living space. Inside, a raised sleeping platform kept people off the cold floor. A small oil lamp, burning seal or whale blubber, provided both light and heat. The body heat of the people inside, combined with the lamp, could raise the internal temperature to well above freezing, even when it was 40 below zero outside. The snow walls would melt slightly on the inside, then refreeze, creating a layer of ice that sealed the structure and made it even stronger. The igloo was a temporary, brilliant solution to the problem of shelter, built from the only material available. But the igloo wasn't the only home. In many areas, people built more permanent houses called karmak. These were semi-underground, with walls made of rock, whalebone, and sod. The earth itself provided insulation. The roof might be made of skins stretched over whale ribs. These homes were used for the long, dark winter months. So you have clothes and shelter, now you need food. Hunting in the Arctic is incredibly difficult. The animals are few and far between. The landscape is vast and unforgiving. You need specialized tools, and you need to know exactly what you're doing. The sea was the source of life. Seals, walrus, and whales provided the fat and protein that fueled survival. But how do you hunt a seal? They spend most of their time in the water under the ice. Inuit hunters developed a technique of waiting, sometimes for hours, perfectly still, at a seal's breathing hole in the ice. When the seal surfaced for air, the hunter would strike with a harpoon. The harpoon itself was a brilliant piece of technology. It wasn't just a sharp spear, it had a toggling head. The tip was a sharp point of bone or stone attached to the shaft by a line. When the hunter struck the seal, the point would go in, then turn sideways, toggle under the skin, and blubber. The shaft would fall away, but the line and the toggling head would be stuck fast inside the animal. The hunter could then play the seal on the line, preventing it from escaping under the ice. This single invention made large sea mammal hunting possible. For open water hunting in the summer, they built two kinds of boats. The kayak was a single-person hunting vessel. It was a long, narrow frame of driftwood or bone, covered in stretched sealskin. It was light, fast, and incredibly seaworthy. A hunter essentially wore the kayak. He would tie his waterproof parka around the cockpit rim, creating a seal that made him and the boat one waterproof unit. If he capsized, he could right himself with a flick of his paddle, the Eskimo roll. The kayak allowed a hunter to silently approach animals in the water. The other boat was the umiak. It was a larger open boat, also made of a frame covered in skin. It was used for transporting families and for hunting large whales. A successful whale hunt was a community effort, requiring multiple umiaks and crews of brave hunters. A single bowhead whale could feed a whole community for an entire winter. On land, the challenge was travel. The distances are huge, the snow is deep, the solution was the dog sled. This wasn't just about taming some dogs. It was about creating a deep partnership with another species. Arctic sled dogs are not pets. They are elite athletes bred for endurance, strength, and a tolerance for cold. They could pull heavy loads for days on end. The dog sled allowed hunters to cover vast territories in search of caribou or to move between hunting camps. It extended the reach of humans exponentially. All of this technology, the clothes, the shelters, the tools, the vehicles, is a form of evolution, cultural evolution. An idea like the toggling harpoon head is like a beneficial genetic mutation. It works. The people who use it are more successful. They survive and have more children. The idea spreads through the population, passed down from parent to child, from one group to another. It can be modified and improved upon much faster than genes can change. A better way to stitch a boot can spread in a single generation. This rapid cultural adaptation was the real key to Arctic survival. But there's one more piece, and it might be the most important. It's the software that runs on the hardware of the brain. It's knowledge. You can have the best kayak and harpoon in the world, but if you don't know where to find the seals, you will starve. Arctic survival depended on an encyclopedic knowledge of the environment. This knowledge was passed down through stories, through observation, through apprenticeships. A child learned to read the ice. They learned what the color and texture of the snow could tell you about its stability. They learned to predict the weather by looking at the clouds or the behavior of the wind. They learned the migration patterns of the caribou, the seasonal habits of the seals, the places where fish could be found. They carried a mental map of a huge, seemingly featureless landscape in their heads, a map of hunting grounds, safe travel routes, and resource locations. This knowledge was held by the community, and the community itself was a crucial piece of technology. No single family could survive alone. The Arctic environment is one of boom and bust. One hunter might be successful for a week, while another finds nothing. The next week, their fortunes could be reversed. The solution was sharing. A successful hunter had a social obligation to share his catch with the rest of the group. This created a network of reciprocity, a safety net that ensured everyone got through the lean times. Individualism was a death sentence. Cooperation was survival. This is where the biological and cultural threads truly weave together. The culture of hunting large, fatty sea mammals drove the biological evolution of genes that could process that fat. The biological need to conserve heat drove the cultural evolution of sophisticated clothing and shelter. The development of tools like the dog sled and kayak allowed people to access resources that fueled their unique metabolisms. It was a feedback loop. Culture allowed humans to create a new ecological niche, and then biology slowly adapted the human body to be even better at living in that niche. One couldn't have happened without the other. The story of human survival in the Arctic is not a story of the past. The people who perfected these techniques are still there. Their descendants, the Inuit, Yupik, and other Arctic peoples, carry this legacy in their genes and their culture. Of course, their world has changed dramatically. Snowmobiles have largely replaced dog sleds. Rifles have replaced harpoons for many types of hunting. Processed foods from the south are now common in Arctic communities. This modern world has created new challenges. The same genetic adaptations that were so beneficial for a traditional diet can be problematic with a modern diet full of carbohydrates and sugar. The CPT1A variant, for example, is linked to a higher risk of hypoglycemia in infants and other health issues when the diet changes. It's a classic case of an evolutionary mismatch, where an adaptation for one environment causes problems in another. Climate change is also a profound threat. The Arctic is warming faster than anywhere else on Earth. The sea ice, that is the foundation of the entire ecosystem, is disappearing. The knowledge of how to read the ice, passed down for generations, is becoming less reliable as conditions become unpredictable. The animals that people depend on are changing their patterns. This ancient way of life, this incredible story of adaptation, is now threatened by a changing world. But the core of the story remains. It's a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. It shows that our greatest strength isn't our teeth or our claws or our speed. It's our ability to adapt. We adapt our bodies over the slow march of generations. And much more quickly, we adapt our minds, creating tools, societies, and systems of knowledge that allow us to live anywhere, even in a world of ice. The Arctic was the ultimate test. It demanded that a tropical ape remake itself in body and in mind to survive. And it did. That is one of the greatest stories of the human journey.